snap your W-2 and file your taxes 100% free.
Test. All right, testing the audio. I'm in live. In live mode. Let's switch this over. All right, we are in live mode. We are live. Jeffrey, thank you for joining me on School, my friend. We're streaming on many different platforms. I'm week 2 into this new format, and boy, it's like flying by the seat of your pants, let me tell you. But thank you all for joining me here today. We're going to be talking about, it's a little bit of a different format. I'm going to talk about a specific topic here. I have content open for questions, so anyone who has questions, happy to cover the details there. But more or less, this is a little bit more of a tighter, Tuesdays are going to be tighter live streams. This is all access. And then I'll have also private live streams on Wednesday and Thursday. This week it's going to be Thursday and Friday, but next week it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday from that point forward. Wednesdays are going to be the real deep dive live streams. So we'll be talking about anatomy, talking about specific body parts and injuries. For instance, when we talk about shoulders, maybe we connect it with the neck, connect it with the mid-back, talk about throwing injuries, talk about overhead reaching injuries, talk about why sleeping is affected, why I get numbness and tingling down my fingers. That's a body part specific type of example, but these are going to be geared more towards the Wednesday live streams. And then the Thursday, this week it's Friday, but Thursday live streams are going to be like an open office hours sort of thing, right? So again, that's going to be a private live stream for a premium community. And that is going to be like, hey, if you got a specific question, you want to get some form feedback on how you're moving. You're like, hey, I got knee pain. I'm trying to get back into running. And every time I start running, I just can't go past a mile without, my knee starting to bark at me. Can look at form mechanics. We can do form feedbacks. I can provide my insights and recommendations in terms of like what, maybe some things that you start out with, just a different perspective. My experience, I have over 20 years in sports medicine, strength and conditioning, working with different populations from high schools, colleges, military special forces, safety and ergonomics, ran my own private practice for a little while. And more or less, like what I'm doing now with MBT is like the culmination of like all of that experience. So just a quick little backstory to talk about, I guess, a little about me, but I want to get more into about you all. The topic for today, something interesting. I talked about this, I brought this up within my school community, and I ended up making a poll saying, hey, how many of you feel like you're cleared already but just don't really understand specifically what cleared means? This is what the live stream is going to be talking about today. So talking about cleared versus prepared, why you don't feel ready after rehab, we'll talk about basically like what that would look like, whether you were injured and recovering from an injury, or if you've never been injured, knock on wood there. And, this will just give you some perspective and insight on what the whole series of events unfolding could look like. So this is that topic, and we're going to get right into it. So starting from the top here, let me play it there. All right, cool. So you're cleared. You don't feel quite ready, but you are cleared. All right, let this sit in. Maybe you've gone to the doctor after you got a little kind of hip issue or knee issue, shoulder issue, whatever the case might be. The doctor says, all right, we're going to order some imaging, and then they get the images, and the images come back negative, right? Imaging being, X-ray or MRI or whatever the whole gamut they throw at you, and they say, well, imaging looks cleared. We're going to write you a script for physical therapy. So they write you the script. You go to PT, you do the rehab, right? You feel like, all right, cool, I feel like a little better. And then after 12 sessions, whatever the case might be, they cut you loose and they say, all right, you're discharged, you met all your requirements, now you can go off into the real world and do whatever you do. But you go back to doing what you try to do, and it's not quite there, right? You try to get back into running, you try to get back into rock climbing, you try to get back into gardening, whatever the case might be, and you're like, man, I don't feel safe doing this. I don't trust my body. I'm still like tight. Like, what is going on here? What is the issue? This is what I'm speaking to, because I've seen this time and time again. This is what I call a functional gap, right? So it's like you get injured. I'll just go to the next slide. Before even that. Okay. So this is the cycle right here, right? You have the thing that you're doing. You get in pain. That's going to be, no, we're busting out the tools here. That's this guy here. You get in pain. And then you go. Doctor writes you the script. They say, okay, you're going to get some PT rehab exercises. We'll get you good to go. You get cleared. And the doctor's like, all right, cool, you're good. PT's like, okay, you're good. You go. And then you're back to doing what you want to be doing. But you're like, oh man, I'm not really sure this feels right. You keep going, have a ball, and then boom, you end up in the yellow. You're like, oh, dang it. I knew I wasn't ready. You re-injured. And then you're back in the cycle of pain, going to the doctor, PT rehab, going back to trying things out, and then ending up re-injured again. And it's just this vicious cycle where you end up like, oh, okay, well, like, I'm kind of tired of having to deal with this. Maybe I just have to give it up, right? And that's not really, I don't believe that's a feasible option. I feel like, from my experience, and I don't even want to say feels, right? Because I have to be a little bit more scientific than that when we talk about these sorts of things. In my experience, this hasn't been the case. It's like you don't have to give up the thing that you want to be doing just because you don't know any other way. Maybe it's just the only ways that you've been trying haven't been the right ways to get you back to what you're trying to do. So it's definitely a steady progression. And when you get discharged from PT, like that is like getting your body safe, but it doesn't mean that it's ready to perform. And that's kind of the whole mantra of what this discussion is all about. So starting off here in my school community, if you're not a part of it, feel free to join. Free community, lots of information, highlights, all that good stuff. Lots of this stuff, lots more of this sort of stuff we talk about. So if you're watching on school, just know that I'm streaming on multi-platform. So I just want to make sure everyone's in the know. I got the link there to the bottom right. It's school.com/movement-based therapy. Anyways, I ended up doing a poll and a post with the poll. And in the poll, the question was, how many of you fully trust that being discharged means you're ready for full activity? So you see there's a mixed bag here of, a few people that participated saying, yeah, I feel cleared. And because I'm cleared, I feel that I assume I'm ready. I should be good. I got a couple people there. Most of the people here said that, yeah, I feel like I'm ready for full activity, but I'm not really sure. I've tried things out, and maybe I got re-injured, or I tried things out, or maybe I just didn't try things out because I was a little hesitant. Intuitively, my body just didn't feel ready. Most people voted that. And then you had a few people here that also voted that, no, I don't feel that I'm ready for full activity. I've been cleared, and I still didn't feel prepared. Kind of the same boat, right? So it's like, a lot of people are sort of left in this like limbo land of saying, okay, well, the doctor said I'm good, but really I don't feel good. My knee doesn't feel stable. My hip still feels tight. I feel like when I reach overhead, I just can't get to where I was before. Why is that? It's like some sort of mystery here when really it's not. It's just kind of like how the healthcare system is built. It's built to react. It's really good at that. It's really good at survival type stuff, keeping you safe. But anything beyond that, when we talk about specific injuries, when we talk about returning to like performance, that becomes like, again, the gap. Like, how do I get from like where I am right now to like where I'm trying to be, right? And there's this gap here that it's kind of treacherous. You don't really know what to do. You like do the YouTube videos. You try the $39.99 program, 12-week programs, and you get 3 weeks in and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't feel right, So more or less, that's kind of the idea here is there is something to say about people who get injured and aren't fully ready to get back to the thing they want to be doing. That's what we're speaking to. So again, it comes down to a few different things. Tissue healing, pain, and just simple basic functions. Like, can you return those simple functions, and do you not have any red flags, right? Red flags being like structural damage, like fractures, or if we're talking about, chronic pain is even a bit of a different factor here, but we'll start from the top. Is the tissue fully healed? A lot of the science says that tissue remodeling can take upwards of years. Just because it takes years doesn't mean it's going to take you that long to get back to the thing you want to be doing, right? You can have, you have basically 3 different phases of healing. You have acute, right? You have proliferation, and you have remodel. So acute is basically like where you're inflamed, right? A lot of people are like, oh, inflammation is a bad thing. No, it's not. Inflammation is required and a prerequisite to stimulate healing. Because if we never had inflammation, no change would ever occur, right? Inflammation is definitely required, but too much of something can be a bad thing. So too much inflammation is a bad thing. Not enough inflammation can deter or can basically delay recovery, right? So this is the issue I have with things like ice, right? And we'll talk about that here in a second. But tissue healing is kind of the main thing we're talking about here. Is the tissue fully remodeled, or can the tissue start taking on load? And if it can start taking on load, what does that progression look like? The next piece here is going to be pain. Pain is like the first prerequisite, really honestly, because part of why we feel pain is inflammation. So if we have too much inflammation, we're going to be in this pain cycle. So if we don't basically like turn down the volume of the pain signal, there's not really going to be any such thing we can do in terms of progress, because anything we try to do is going to elicit a pain signal and is going to psychologically mess with us to a point where we aren't really able to fully commit to the process of recovering and healing and getting back to that thing. So pain is the first signal that we have to be able to modulate and control. And then once we get that, then we know that basically if pain is turned down, inflammation is gone from basically like acute, which is fresh, to like subacute, where you can start actually loading the tissue. Not full bore, but you can start doing progressions that at least like stimulate adaptation. And with things like injury, right? Like say for instance, you pull a muscle, the muscle's a little irritated. You want to load the muscle because essentially when you first get injured, your body's laying down collagen. So it's kind of like piping a patch, patching a pipe. Patches the pipe doesn't necessarily mean it's a strong patch, right? And when your body first lays down collagen, it lays down like that type 2 collagen. So very kind of like a very thick, not really mobile, and it's not very pliable, and because of that, it's not very durable. So you have to load the tissue, and you have to load the tissue in sort of like the fiber direction or the fiber orientation. So if the tissue's normally like striated like this, so if you look at a muscle and you see the tissue striated, I'm just gonna pull up my app here. I'm trying to keep this to a tight live stream, but we're gonna go down a rabbit hole here. All right, I'm gonna pull up my app, Mr. Anatomy. All right, we're gonna share the screen. Make sure I get the right screen to share. Okay, cool. Right, so if we look at a muscle here, something like the biceps, you can see the fiber orientation goes from my elbow to my shoulder. So this would be the way I would want to load the bicep. Because say for instance, I get an injury right in the middle of the bicep, I pull some of the tissue there, and now it's irritated, or now it's basically inflamed. It's going to lay down a patch in every which way, right? So now the tissue is starting to remodel. But now we want to start to load the tissue because type 2 collagen turns to type 1 collagen, which is more longer. I would say that's kind of more the permanent remodel phase, the permanent remodel of the tissue. So if you don't load the tissue, the type 2 turns to type 1, and it's just very thick and scar tissue. So like a lot of people that get like joint replacements, if they don't move their joint, they end up getting a lot of scar tissue, and they're way more stiff than when they went in because they didn't load the tissue accordingly, and now the knee is basically stuck. So what do they have to do? More oftentimes than not, the doctor's going to recommend that they have to go under the knife again, and they have to debride the tissue. So clean up the scar tissue so that the knee can move relatively within a relative normative range. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than when it was congested. And that's kind of what it is with scar tissue. So whether it's scar tissue, whether it's not loading the tissue accordingly, we can sort of be our own worst enemy because of that. So we have to make sure And this is the thing that I hear with a lot of people is they get injured, they ice it, they rest it, and they just continue to ice and rest because they don't feel ready. Ice, now we're going into the conversation about ice. Before I do, I'm going to go back to my iPad. Ice is not nice in terms of tissue healing. It's okay for short-term pain modulation. More than anything, that's all it really does. And to kind of like stunt like further secondary tissue damage. So ice is good for vasoconstriction. So that means that the blood vessels, if the blood vessel were like this length, this width here, when I put ice on, it's going to narrow out. So it's going to slow down basically circulation. It's also going to slow down the nerve from firing. So that's why the pain signal is diminished. But it's not increasing recovery. It's not reducing inflammation. I mean, theoretically, it's reducing inflammation, but it's more or less just delaying inflammation because you still have to have that inflammatory response for the tissue to heal. Unless you're perpetually icing, then essentially you're remodeling tissue and not getting adequate nutrients because inflammation is how this transfer happens. So all that to say is ice for certain things, certain occasions, but not ice for everything, and definitely not rest 100% of the time, right? Ice, like rest, maybe like the first 10%. And then after that, you got like, I'm early loading all day, right? So as soon as you're able to start taking load, you're out of relative like severe, you're from like severe pain to like manageable pain. I want to start loading because that's where we're going to start creating adaptations. That's the soonest, safest timeline we're able to stimulate and create adaptations. Having said that, make sure that you're under proper supervision. You know what you're doing and you're not putting yourself in a pickle or digging yourself back in the hole you got out of just because some guy on a live stream said that you should be loading your tissue after you got injured. That's not the full picture here. I'm just speaking in terms of tissue healing, tissue remodeling, recovery, injury rehab. This is the idea to get you back to performance or the thing you want to be doing. Is you want to be thinking about early loading, as safe as possible early loading, and then also take into consideration things like pain, things like tissue remodel, and getting basic function restored, which is what PT does a really good job at, right? So traditional model, you get sent to physio. They're really good at getting you back to basic normative function, right? Can you walk? You know, if you have a house with stairs, can you walk up and down stairs with relative ease, right? Maybe you got to hang on to the rail now, but hey, you can get up and down stairs. You're discharged, right? And you're like, well, I got to hang on to the rails and I didn't have to do this before. There's a little extra. That's the functional gap that I was talking to earlier that has to be filled in, right? So that's his idea. And then you have no red flags. Like, okay, you're not a danger to yourself when we discharge you, right? The soonest you can check that box, you're out the door, right? From a healthcare model, right? But that doesn't mean that you're ready to get back to the thing you're trying to be doing. All right, so performance requires load tolerance. This is everything I was talking about just now. So the soonest you're able to load and you want to progress that load to whatever you're trying to do, whether it's playing soccer, running a Spartan race, marathon, doing rock climbing, whatever the thing that gives you joy in life and purpose, don't give that thing up. You just have to have the strategy that gets you back there that is safe, effective, and optimized to meet you where you're at so that you can have that progression back to the activity. This is the idea here. This is what a lot of people miss is they just get back to like, okay, I'm discharged from the doctor. Now I'm going to go to the gym and lift 100 pounds or whatever the case might be, relatively, right? That's the wrong way to look at it is it has to be very specific. So isolated exercises are good for rehab, but eventually, what you need to do is integrate it with the kinetic chain. When you're kicking a soccer ball, it's not just your quad working, right? Your hip has to stabilize. Your trunk has to be able to absorb and transmit forces. What are your arms and shoulders doing? Do you have good range of motion or are you stuck? Is your neck jammed up? That's going to affect you downstream. Do you have good ankle range of motion, right? Can you plant on the foot, on a stable foot, right? These are all the things that are tied into the kinetic chain. So when it's an ankle injury, yeah, I'm going to address the ankle, but I'm going to also address the calves. I'm going to address the quads. I'm going to address the hamstrings, the hip complex, the inner, the outer thighs. I'm going to address the trunk. I'm going to look upstream to see how the neck is moving because there's this thing called regional interdependence, which basically says just because you're injured in one area doesn't mean that was the root cause of the injury. So for instance, if I'm walking and I over-rotate my right shoulder and I have a hip problem, this could be totally a situation, and I've seen it time and time again in the clinic. This exact situation is interpreted as a hip issue when in reality it's a shoulder issue or it's a foot issue, right? So these are things we have to take into consideration with regards to injury, with regards to returning back to like a full activity is the idea here. All right, so we talked about movement control under stress. These are all basically like, when you load tissue, that's going to be a stressor. When you're moving, when you're loading tissue, it is going to be a stressor, and it has to be the right stressor, meeting you where you're at and progressing you to where you want to be. That's basically case in point. Progressive exposure. Yep. So you need to load accordingly. You need to make sure you're progressing, right? It's not like getting in the comfort zone. You're constantly uncomfortable when it comes to something like rehab, recovery, and especially getting back to performance, Just in general, if you're an athlete and you're at practice, like you're going to suffer a little bit, and that's how you create adaptation. This is basically a watered down version of it with an incorporation of actual physical structural pain because of an injury you're having to recover from, right? So if it's an ankle, if it's a shoulder, if it's an oblique, whatever, right? The tissue is damaged, and now you have to basically reorient, reformat, and reintegrate the tissue from a structural, but also from a neurological standpoint. The brain has to trust that the tissue can take load and tie it into the entire system. And when you get injured, it never quite goes back to 100%. Like an elastic band, you stretch it out, never quite goes back. Though it's arguable that you can get it stronger than it was before, it's not going to ever be a one-for-one match in terms of remodel because the tissue has been interrupted. So the reason why you come back stronger after an injury, right, is because one, you had a smart rehab program. Two, the things you learned in the rehab program ingrained movement patterns that were more optimal than what you were doing before. So maybe in the instance of tearing an ACL, right? We know ACL, it's a dynamic valgus. So the knee buckles in, ACL goes pop, and then there goes the knee, right? So you rehab it 6-9 months down the road, you're back to like getting back into sport. Throughout that whole process, throughout the whole 6 to 9 months, you were learning how to fire the quad. You were learning how to stabilize the foot. You were learning about your big toe and how important it was in terms of balance, coordination, and foot loading. You were learning how to tie into the kinetic chain. You were learning plyometrics. You were learning basically like smoothing out the movement patterns, and you're becoming even that much more aware of what you don't want to do, which is letting that knee buckle inwards. So now all of this new information is culminated and now makes you come back into the field, into your activity with newfound knowledge that when you're performing, you're going to be like, oh, wow, like I feel a lot more stronger. It's like, yeah, you are. You're just a lot more cleaned up and optimized is what it is. You're more of an optimized mover, I should say, is the idea here. So that is progressive exposure, and the confidence is restored. Again, neuromuscularly, your brain has to trust that your body or that structure is able to take on load and perform. So that is the confidence component, big psychological component, because time and time again, I've ran into people, I've worked with clients that they get injured and they're like, yeah, like I pulled my calf. I'm like, how long ago was this? This was like 5 years ago. Oh God, this is still bugging you? It's like, the tissue is definitely remodeled by this point. So now there's some sort of psychological trigger that is impairing you from using that tissue to what it should be able to do, right? Maybe there's some scar tissue. Maybe it just wasn't rehabbed right. Sure, I'll acknowledge that. But more than anything, it's a psychological component of you not trusting yourself to use that tissue because you haven't been exposed to progressive strategies that get you in an environment to stimulate basically what it would be like to whatever the relative activity is. So you're a sprinter, you were basically rehabbed, and you didn't feel that functional gap back to sprint. And now you sprint at like 60% because you don't trust yourself, because you've never gone through the steps to expose yourself to what it would be like to grade yourself back to full sprint. That's the biggest thing here, right? So the confidence, that's how you restore confidence from a psychological standpoint. Graded exposure. We've talked about this cycle, right? So you get in pain, you go to PT rehab, or you get into pain, you go to the doctor prescribes you a script for PT rehab after they do the imaging. You do about 12 sessions, whatever the case might be of that, and you get discharged, right? Discharge just means you're safe to do whatever, regular everyday life is relative to you. But you want to do more. So you do more, and then you get re-injured because you never filled that functional gap accordingly, right? And now you're going back in that circle of pain, go to the doctor, hey, I'm re-injured, PT rehab, back in the cycle we go. So we don't want to do that, right? We got to be able to progressively load and grade ourselves to that exposure. Safety does not equal capacity, right? That's the case in point here. So when you rehab, you get discharged from PT, it doesn't mean that you're ready to go back to loading tissue 100% because you don't have the capacity to do so. You just have a basic like a foundational level, maybe even sub-foundation. Like the concrete is still drying on the foundation, on the slab that we laid. It's not fully set yet, right? And so when you step in the concrete, what happens? Footprints are left. It's not looking pretty anymore. It's just kind of sloppy. Maybe you don't have the board, the edges around, and it's just starting to kind of like slosh down the side, right? This is the idea here. We want to have a strong foundation, and that's where capacity comes in. Capacity comes from, again, learning neuromuscularly, learning from a neuromuscular standpoint what a good position is, right? So there's different strategies that you can incorporate for this. Learning, what the graded exposure is going to be to get back to that activity. That's a strategy, right? It's not like, oh, I'm not going to go crawl, run. Well, you just totally skipped walk, right? And now because you skipped walk, you skipped learning opportunities to trust in yourself, to learn and refine movement patterns that now you're just going to run. It's like a jog instead of a run because you missed all those steps, right? And a jog is basically an intermediary between a walk and a run, right? But now you skipped walk and now you're just at a jog. You're perpetually at a jog, let's just say, right? So this is the idea here. All right. So why flare-ups happen? This is a good one here. Why flare-ups happen is because you exceed your load tolerance. So, you go from crawl to run, for instance. The control breaks down under fatigue. And most people, a lot of people, what I've seen is in a lot of instances, it's people overload their tissue. So they think that they're under this false ideation of pain is weakness leaving the body. No, pain is your check engine light coming on to let you know to pay attention to something before a catastrophic trauma or breakdown occurs, right? We want to be able to differentiate pain from discomfort, and mild discomfort is where you want to be all day. I've spoken to this before. This is the idea here. But if you get fatigued and your form breaks down, and that's how you train, that's how you learn. So now you're learning a shitty movement pattern. And when you try to go to perform, that's going to be your default. So that's why, especially from a rehab standpoint, movement pattern optimization is like the key here. It's the key to a strong recovery because what you learn in rehab is how you perform. Whether it's in a controlled setting like a gym, or whether it's in a competition, or whether it's in a scrimmage, or whatever the case might be, how you practice is how you perform. And if you're practicing like trash, you're going to perform like trash, right? And practice in this instance, in this example, is going to be rehab, right? So when you rehab, when you're recovering, the strategies that you learn to optimize your movement pattern or not optimize is going to significantly affect the outcomes down the road. All right. Incomplete progression. So going from crawl to run, I'm just going to revert back to that. And random exercise layering. This is the big one here. A lot of people I talk to, clients I've worked with, they don't know what to do. They just throw a bunch of things together that they saw on their Instagram and think that they can call it a day there. Nope, that's not the right thing to do, right? It's very specific. In all honesty, rehab is very, very, very boring. It's so boring, but it's so necessary, right? Who wants to just stay in a lunge for 25 seconds of 3 reps when you could be squatting 1,000 pounds, right? It's what looks sexy, but it's not right, and it's not right for you, right? Maybe it's right for the dude squatting 1,000 pounds, but it's relative. It's all relative, right? So rehab, again, so boring, but so necessary. Even for like the smart athletes, they have recovery work. They have active recovery that they're doing where they're doing mobility. They're doing what's called pliability, whatever you want to coin it as. Basically, think of it like this. Do you have a race car? You think the race car is just going 1,000 miles an hour the entire time? No, you got to put it into the shop. You got to do the maintenance and upkeep to make sure that you're able to run it, right? That's the same idea. It's how we treat our bodies. We can't just run our bodies from the ground, work ourselves to death, and just expect to continue to perform. Like, that is not sustainable. from a durability standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, from a performance standpoint. You can go to any like well-known club, team, whatever. I 1000% guarantee you they have recovery embedded into their training regimen, whether it's on season or off season. Any professional athlete that is worth anything, Cristiano Ronaldo, you know his recovery regimen is like millions of dollars. LeBron James, same deal. Like these guys are pouring millions of dollars into their body per year. And it's not to train harder, it's to be able to train harder, but really the emphasis of what they're pouring the money into is to improve their physiology, because as we age, physiology doesn't increase, doesn't improve. So it's a management of everything we've talked about. Can we control load? Can we take load? How long can we take load for? How can we allow our bodies to take more load for a longer time and fatigue out less? This is like essentially what biohacking is what you're doing, right? So you got to be able to, like that term biohacking, it's such a trendy term, like breath work or somatics or anything like that. But once you understand like the true intention of what its purpose is, then you can apply it to your situation, right? So like, yeah, sure, I'm all for biohacking, but like biohacking for what? Like, what are we looking at specifically? And then again, like my evidence-based brain will go back to like, what does the science say? But yes, I will say, I try to be more practical with the science. I'm not like, oh, dude, look, I need to have like these research trials on, I need to have like 10 clinical trials on this topic before I actually take it into consideration. No, like I'm gonna pay attention to anecdotes, though I would like to see some evidence on what the science is saying. It's helpful from like a macro lens. Like I can say like, okay, they did like, they had a case study and they had 1,000 participants on this specific topic here on heart rate variability. That confirms what I'm looking at when I interpret heart rate variability on an individual or on a client level, right? It's helpful, but it's not the end all be all. So it's just good information to have more than anything. All right, we kind of digressed off that, so I'm going to switch here. So yeah, most people skip step 2, the progressive loading, and the tolerance testing as well, right? They just go from like, okay, I'm discharged. Well, let me see like what I can do, or maybe not even that, because that would be in essence tolerance testing. They just go straight to like, I'm just gonna like do 3 sets of 20 at 20% or whatever the case might be because David Goggins said so. Okay, no, like let's back off a little bit. That's David Goggins. It's not relative to you. Use you and your personal experience and find what you need. Because maybe you don't even need that. Again, that's kind of the random exercise layering. And that's the thing social media does a really good job at. It keeps your attention to pay attention to the things that look cool. But trust me, rehab is not cool. It's super boring, but so necessary to keep the machine running. So the steps are tolerance test, right? So you do a diagnostic assessment or evaluation to see where your starting point, see where your baseline is. Because you had a baseline. Now you're post-injury and discharge. You're going to have a new baseline. It's not going to be the same as before. So you basically, for instance, you say you have your baseline from before, right? If you're a really good data collector, you have your baseline from before, you get injured, now you have your baseline after. You say, okay, like here is my functional gap. This is what I got to fill in here. So now you progressively load, right? Now you progressively load, and then now you're at the point of where you were. Again, the tissue isn't going to be remodeled to the same standard of what it was, but at least in terms of performance, you're back where you were, right? When we think of like extremity asymmetries. So for instance, like a leg, like you tear your ACL, before we consider even putting you back in with a team, if it's like a team sport, like a soccer athlete, for instance, they tear the ACL and then they want to get back to playing soccer again. We have to see no less than a 10% difference when we compare bilaterally, right? So let's say you tear your left ACL, your right ACL is totally fine. You're at 100% on your right, and now you're at like 50% on your left. So we have to build this left side up to at least 90% before we can consider to safely integrate you into team sports. This is like a standard across like all sports medicine, orthopedics, etc. Right? This is the idea here. So you have to have a 10% deficit, no more than a 10% deficit when compared bilaterally. How do you measure that, Sheldon? Well, you got things like force velometers, velocimeters. Basically, you can measure the force of how hard you can contract your leg, whether you're extending, whether you're flexing internally, or AB adducting, all these sorts of things. So that's what you want to measure, and then you measure side by side to say, okay, your right side you can produce this amount of force. Your right side, left side, right side, you can promote this amount of force. Now you compare, right? You take an average and you compare. Say, okay, this is where we need to be. Not quite there yet. These are called like isokinetic machines. So basically, like you would sit in a machine and you would kick your leg out as hard as you could, and that would basically, the computer would spit out a number to say what it was. They've refined this technology since, but that's kind of the idea here. Okay, we've talked about what most people skip and what those steps would look like. So prepared means demonstrated capacity. Prepared means, so you get it tested, just like we've just talked about. You progress it accordingly based off of where you're at. This is all relative here. And then you repeat it. You repeat it, you repeat it, you repeat it. Repetition is the master of learning is the idea here. You practice it, you refine the movement patterns, and then you own it. You're psychologically entrusted and your body's able to trust what you're able to do, and then you're back to doing what you want to be doing. That's basically the steps here, right? So it's a strategy. It's a little more subtly, it's a little more nuanced than this, but this is basically like high level overview of what that would be. Awesome. Okay, cool. Like I said, this one's pretty tight here. So I'm going to have another live stream on Thursday and then one on Friday. Those are going to be private in the school community. This week, everyone's getting access to all the live streams. So as long as you're in the school community, you can see it pop up. Feel free to join, swing by, ask any questions you want. But right now, I'm going to leave this as an open opportunity for a little Q&A if anyone has. So I'm going to browse through here and see if there's any questions that came up in the chat. No sound. Oh, there's no sound? Oh, there is no sound. Dang, on school it was muted. I am so sorry. Okay. Well, the replay will definitely have sound. I promise you that. All right. So there's that. I'm looking on I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube right now. I'm pretty sure I'm on Instagram. Let's see. I gotta figure out this Instagram thing. I was trying to stream it on Instagram. Apparently it didn't. So I'm on the YouTube as well. Let me see if anyone posted any comments on the tube. On the tube. This is not right. So weird. Okay. Oh, here we are. Okay, so. All right, nothing in the YouTube. I'm going to cap it off here. Everyone, if you're in the school community, thank you for being a member. Nothing is changing about the free community. I just want you all to know that. I just have to basically like segment the information because of what I intend on offering. It's going to be a lot bigger than what it is right now. I'm going to have programs. I'm going to create basically like program templates, body specific program, like rehab program templates. You're going to have access to the video version of the podcast along with research, like cited research documents. That's in the community right now. That's going to be sectioned off as well. In addition to that, I'll have the private live stream. So 2 private live streams in addition to the Tuesday live stream. One live stream is going to be very body specific segmental breakdown with anatomy, injury pathomechanics, rehab considerations, these sorts of things. And then the other live stream is going to be specifically like an office hour style Q&A. So for that, the office style Q&A, again, I'll be in my office for an hour. You can come in if you have any specific questions, whether it's injury rehab, whether it's body specific things, whether it's personal things that you're having to go through and you had some questions on and you just wanted some insights on. I will be there for that. So really stoked to be hosting this. In addition to that, also have an exercise library, which I'm constantly adding things to. So really excited for that. And the other big piece of that is, again, the community, right? Whether you're a free member, whether you're a free or a premium member, whatever the case might be, you're always going to have access to the school community. So just a really cool, awesome group of people. I'm super grateful to host and to have around. This has just been such a wild ride. I started this in, like, just full transparency, I started this in like October, November, and it's just starting to grow more and more. Every day I show up is just a day I'm just super grateful to communicate and collaborate and do these sorts of things. So this is just me again. My mantra last year, like at the end of the year resolution, sort of like reflection, was like, I'm going all in on me. I continue to do that, and it's cool things like this, the community, the things that I intend to offer, that are just a testament to that. So thank you all for being a part of this journey. But I just want to share that. So everyone who's in the community, you're going to see this transition start to happen this week. I'm shifting things around. I'm adding things to the classroom. You'll have unrestricted access to that this entire week. And then starting the top of next week, that is going to fully transition officially to premium, and there'll be tiered memberships. So if you have any questions on that, don't hesitate to reach out, shoot me a DM. I've posted that in the community as well too, so you can grab the info there. I'll make another post once we officially transition over, just to provide some clarity and transparency in terms of what this is going to look like moving forward. But thank you all that have been here this whole wild ride and continue to be here. And I look forward to just kind of supporting and continuing to nurture the journey that you all are on, as this is great. So having said that, like I said, if you're not ready to start with premium, not a problem. You're always welcome to join the free community, right? And that is going to be at skool.com/movement-based therapy. You can see that link right down below there. To host these awesome weekly live streams. I love doing these things, and I've expanded out to other platforms, and it's just so much more engaging. It's a real cool opportunity that I'm just really happy and grateful to be a part of. But weekly education, weekly live streams. Every Tuesday I'm doing this stuff. We have live breakdowns, focused Q&A, community engagement. Like, the members are so engaging. I'm so grateful for that as well too. That people are just asking questions, introducing themselves, engaging with the post, and just really being genuine. So I thank you all for being a part of that and engaging and allowing me to help nurture this community and provide insight. And along with providing the insight, the trust you put into me, in me to provide this insight, is just something that I will forever be. I keep saying grateful, but it's just a lot of gratefulness. Super just grateful to be able to dispense my experience and education and knowledge to help people around the world. More than anything, that's all I want to do with this community. So, yeah. Focus Q&A. So, okay, we got the Q&A. That's what this is, and as well as the community engagement. That's an awesome part of it. And then structured return to performance thinking. Right, so that's kind of like the level before, like the programs and full-on engagement that you would get in premium. But I don't cut the free community off by any means. So you can get a hold of me. You can shoot me a DM if you got any questions, whatever the case might be. I'm all game. So thank you all for being here. And remember, last final words of wisdom, clearance is safety, right? You're cleared by your doctor. That means you're safe, but preparation is capacity. Being ready to perform, that is capacity. That is what we need to really be building on. That is the overall mantra of this stream here. So stop guessing, build capacity. Join me on my school community at skool.com/movement-based therapy. Would love to have you there. Thank you all again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next community-wide live stream. This is like every Tuesday. So I do this every Tuesday, 11 Pacific time. Feel free to join, whether you're on YouTube, TikTok. I'll have it on the Instagram here as well by next time. But thank you all for being here again. I'm going to stop talking, and I'll see you all on the next one.